last night at 6 o'clock p.m. Eastern, we saw the conclusion of the MLB trade deadline. A bunch of moves taking place this summer. Didn't end up getting quite as much action, specifically in the starting pitcher front as we sort of anticipated, but one of the biggest, I would say, definitely on the pitching front, the biggest move that was done was the Los Angeles Dodgers, who I consider to be a winner coming out of this year's deadline. They acquired a number of different names: Jack Flaherty, Tommy Edman, Ahmed Rosario, Michael Kopech, and Kevin Kiermaier, all to add to what is already a first-place team in their division as it is. I've talked about this in the past. I think it is the Phillies and the Dodgers that are really the top two in the MLB right now in terms of, sort of running away World Series odds, but still a lot of season to go, of course. And sometimes in the Dodgers case, that hasn't necessarily been a great thing, because we've seen over the course of the past couple seasons, this season included, they've been dealing with numerous injuries to players from their starting rotation, and it has ended up being an obstacle for them to overcome. But they come out of this trade deadline with probably the best starting pitcher that was moved in Jack Flaherty from the Detroit Tigers. They got a little bit of everything in this at this trade deadline, but getting Flaherty helps to be a top-end rotation player. Again, maybe the only one that was moved this season. And, for the most part, the Dodgers feel like they can have some of those top-end guys when fully healthy, but obviously, Ohtani isn't pitching this year. Yamamoto has been dealing with injuries for the past month or so, and along with a number of other players for them. Tyler Glasnow finally back now. Was okay, got roughed up a little bit yesterday in what was a disappointing loss for the Dodgers against the Padres. The Padres, another team that we're going to be diving into, but I also thought that on top of the pitching, they got some pretty nice depth to their lineup. Ahmed Rosario has been an above-average hitter this season. Playing for the Rays, he's hitting .307 with a 113 OPS plus, so the Dodgers were able to acquire him. Tommy Edman is another name that I think could be a real X factor for the Dodgers, considering he's an X factor because you also don't necessarily know. He's yet to step foot onto an MLB field this year. Acquired from the Cardinals, he had surgery during the offseason on his wrist. During his rehab stint, he suffered a setback with an ankle soreness injury. So this is a player that is a former Gold Glove winner, provides experience in the infield and the outfield. He is, just about an average bat, which is kind of no complaints there when you talk about the Dodgers, who were in need for a little bit of depth. So getting those type of utility men is definitely a positive for them. And ultimately, I thought that all things considered, they didn't even have to pay that much in terms of prospect price to get all of these deals done, which the same cannot be said for their division rival in the San Diego Padres, where I am also going to slot them into a winner category here because they got better, 100%. They end up adding Tanner Scott and Jason Adam. You look at the Padres, and they might be one of the, if not the best bullpen in the MLB now. Also understanding that from the perspective of the Padres here, they already have Robert Suarez, who can definitely eat up some of those high leverage situations as well. I mean, Tanner Scott, in my opinion, is pitching just about as good as anybody is currently. So he was one of the pieces I was most intrigued to see whether or not he ended up getting moved, and he did. So he goes to the Padres. Really interesting little arc here that's been taking place with the Padres after the past couple of years. where they have been so high spending. They look to cut back on payroll a little bit, but they find themselves in a very competitive position here in the National League. And like I said, the Phillies and the Dodgers are the two teams that sort of feel like the obstacles in the way. But outside of that, you can make an argument that it is a very open pennant chase this year. So, the Padres end up making some moves to get themselves better today, but it did cost them a number of high-end prospects for them, and I consider them a winner, maybe more of a slight winner, but don't love doing the cross-sports comparisons, but just this past year in the NBA, we saw the Dallas Mavericks mortgage a lot of their future draft assets to try and build up on their current roster, that they felt like they were in the mix, and that ultimately there was a pretty open opportunity for them. And I kind of feel like that can be said the same a little bit for the Padres. Now, obviously, we look back at that trade deadline for the Mavericks in the NBA so much higher because of the fact that they just went to the NBA Finals. So that's going to be a little bit of a similar curve here that we are going to keep in mind when talking about how we will ultimately look back on this trade deadline for the Padres. But they're trying to gear up for a playoff run. Fernando Tatis, it sounds like he is rearing towards being able to play again sometime soon, but sometime soon in August, but we'll have to see on that end. I do think that the Padres have a very good roster, so we'll see on that front. A couple slight winners that I do want to point out as well. I'll give some credit to the Arizona Diamondbacks, so far very NL West heavy in these winners so far, but that's because I think, these top three teams made some moves that legitimately made them better this season. The Diamondbacks got a couple bullpen arms to help them out in AJ Puck and Dylan Floro. They just basically at the last minute were able to pull off a trade for Josh Bell, which is a big-time pickup in terms of their offense. We see they're starting to play after what was a little bit of a slow start to the season. They're starting to play some really good baseball. The comeback win on Monday night, just yesterday, winning 17-0 against the Nationals. I think that the Diamondbacks are a team that again, haven't gotten a ton of coverage so far this year, but could potentially look to be another, sneaky team going on to make a run once again. So I would put them in the category of a slight winner. You can't not look at what Jazz Chisholm Jr. is doing for the Yankees right now and feel like that was an incredible fit in there. And when you look at their lineup now that they have Jazz and that Giancarlo Stanton is back, when we talk about rounding out this lineup and having it be more well-balanced, Gleyber Torres hitting first, Juan Soto, Aaron Judge, Giancarlo Stanton, Jazz Chisholm Jr., I would specifically look at the 2 through 5 there that feel like any one of them can take you deep. Torres having a down season offensively, but has been a productive bat for a number of years. Volpe has been pretty hot since the All-Star break. We saw the flash early on in the season. Whatever he can emerge as would be a positive. So offensively, I do think that the Yankees got better, and Jazz fits a couple different needs there eventually. Still hitting 5th as he is today. The Yankees are currently beating the Phillies 4-3 with a chance to sweep the best team in baseball. And you also add in a nice little pickup of Mark Leiter Jr., who has been, I talked about it before, I love that pickup when they made it yesterday. We got to see Leiter's debut with the Yankees last night. I believe he pitched the 10th inning when they went into extra innings. It was one of those extra inning situations, was able to escape there without giving up any runs. I thought he looked good there. So I would throw the Yankees into a winners category as well. And then very quickly here, I like that the Pirates ended up making some sort of deals here. Again, nothing crazy necessarily. We are talking about the Pittsburgh Pirates, so definitely lower expectations in that regard. But they make a couple moves here of trading for Brian De La Cruz from the Marlins and Isaiah Kiner-Falefa, so definitely good there. Also, I guess while I bring up the Marlins, I was a little bit harsh on them yesterday talking about the enormous amounts of talent that they've sent out the door via trade over the past 7 years or so, but ultimately they ended up getting a lot of good prospect return, and considering the fact that you feel like it hurts to see the Marlins sell off these pieces once again and that they're sort of gutting their major league roster. But at this point, they made that push last year. They make the playoffs. They end up losing in the wild card round, and they were never going to be competitive this season. So you know what? If you're going to cash out, again, it's just the big to be determined is what ends up playing out here for the Marlins in terms of what these players actually become for them. But I got to give them credit for the way that they were able to get a number of, top prospects in return for all of the guys that they traded off. A couple pitchers in there as well. Already mentioned Tanner Scott, but Trevor Rogers as well. They ended up making out pretty well for themselves. Running out of time here, so some quick losers that I will throw into the conversation. I don't think that there were any teams. The teams that I was most frustrated with were the ones, like I talked about, the Marlins didn't want to be treading water in some middle ground. Those teams that didn't end up making deals, that's where my frustrations came. The Angels, the White Sox, the Athletics. Now, a lot of these, players that they have, you feel like they could at least come back around in the winter and end up striking a deal there. I'll give the White Sox some sort of defense a little bit, considering the fact that Garrett Crochet didn't make anything easy with the terms that he was throwing out there to other teams that he was likely going to refuse going into the bullpen for the remainder of this season. If he's going to be pitching in the postseason, he needs to have a new contract extension on the books. So the White Sox, I do give a little bit of a pass here, but the Angels and the Athletics, I just feel like they are these two teams that just, again, hovering in no man's land. The Athletics, it felt like even more so that they were sort of acting under the idea that they understand they are going to be relocating and that they want to draw in fans for when they move into Sacramento before they ultimately make the move to Vegas. So they wanted to be able to almost sell tickets. Mason Miller is a big-time name at this point, was in contention for Rookie of the Year in the American League before he ended up fracturing his finger when he hit a table and ended up putting himself on the 15-day IL. So that move kind of almost took Miller out of trade candidacy at that point. But with Brent Rooker, I mean, he's a great player. I would also want to, have him on my team if I'm the Athletics from the fun perspective. I think he's an incredible player. All-Star last year, has improved on his All-Star campaign. He's currently slashing .297, .372, .965. That can't be right. That's got to be his OPS. Looking at my notes here, but OPS plus of 174. He has, he's been incredible for them, but also at the same time, he's going to be turning 30 next season, and it feels like now is the time to strike in terms of getting a return for him. And we don't exactly know necessarily what was going behind the scenes there as to what types of packages they were hearing in return for Brent Rooker. It sounded like, according to ESPN's Jeff Passan, that they were reluctant to trade him anyways, and ultimately they just sort of stay put. And just a little bit disappointing there. A lot of those same points you can make for the Angels as well, who had a few, specifically bats that could have ended up, making a splash somewhere else. But the last loser I'll throw into this category is the Houston Astros, and it's very slight because acquiring Yusei Kikuchi does a little bit fill out a need for them in terms of having another starting pitcher. So I'm not going to necessarily kill the addition of him to their roster, but I also feel like at the same time, with the amount of prospect value that you gave up, and he is going to be a rental for them, that it is, definitely a very steep price. You wonder what's going on behind the scenes there in terms of, do the Astros feel like there is a window closing? We saw them get out to such a slow start at the beginning of this year, and I wonder if maybe they think that that is a sign of what's to come. Not really sure, but they also didn't really add any bats to that offense as well, which is playing a lot better as of late, but I feel like they could have gone for an upgrade there. But let me know what you think in the comments section as far as winners and losers. But we are going to be switching gears now, because yesterday we got the announcement that DJ Moore has agreed to a contract extension with the Chicago Bears. So we're going to be diving into that and what it means for the Bears this upcoming season, and not just this season, but years to come with the development of Caleb Williams as well. So we will get into all of that, but first, a quick break. Don't go anywhere. We will be right back.